This video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Hey guys, Big Paul here today with another anabolic Q&A. I got some good ones up today. It's been a crazy week. I'm recording this at the last minute, so hopefully this all makes sense. But I have some really good questions for you. We're going to dig into them in just 1 second. All right, first question I've got here is from RS. RS asked on the high days, this is reference to carb cycling for those of you that don't know, how much of a surplus would you say you are eating? 500 to 700 calories or more? And would you recommend the high days be the day before the large body parts? All right, so the high days, the way we do the high days, it is different when you're in a massing phase than it is when you are on a cut. On a cut, we are doing high days once per week. And generally that high day, the high day on the cut often tends to be higher than what you would run in the off season because, and usually at the back half of a cut, not at the front half, because you get really depleted at the end, and that's your opportunity to refill glycogen, and we want to use the other days for fat burning. So the surplus it sounds counterintuitive, but so the surplus in a cut can be pretty crazy sometimes. There were some high days during my contest prep this year where I estimated that my high days were in excess of 7,000 calories. And I estimate that my maintenance calories are somewhere in between 3,500 and 3,800 calories. Somewhere in that range. I get below that, I start losing weight. So they can be pretty crazy. So that's over a 3,000 calorie surplus on contest prep, which is nutty when you think about it. But you're sort of tricking your energy management systems in your body. You're not violating thermodynamics. So what ends up happening? A large bodybuilder, somebody my size, I go 270 in the off season. I was 236 on stage. Can store, over 1,000 grams of carbs as glycogen, sometimes even more than that. I mean, there were times that I would eat 1,500 grams of carbs or thereabouts on contest prep. There was times where Justin gave me unlimited high days on contest prep, and I didn't gain any weight. My weight would bounce a little bit the day after just from water retention, but I would go right back to baseline 48 hours later. So. But what ends up happening, it's not that you're not storing those excess calories as fat, they're being stored as glycogen. So it's in a way of keeping you full while stimulating your metabolism and burning fat during contest prep. Now in the off season, there are periods of time where I'll run 3 high days a week. Usually it's 2, and those high days are not as high as they are during prep because I am in a caloric surplus pretty much every day except for the low day. And I only run 1 low day per week during the off season because I train 6 days a week. To answer the second half of your question, is it the day before large body parts? No, we run the high days actually on the on the large body part day. So there would be insulin deployed during that day. I generally run Humalog at meals 1, 3, and 5. I'm not telling you should run Humalog, but this is how I do it. I run Humalog at meals 1, 3, and 5 on the high days. I do 6 meals, so I'm getting Humalog in every other meal. I keep my fats as low as possible because any excess fats when we're in a high carb state with insulin are likely going to be stored as adipose tissue, which we don't want. We want to preferentially burn it or store it as glycogen. And that's how I run the high days during the off season, and they're 2 to 3 days per week. Now, the reason we don't run them higher like we do during contest prep is because I am in a caloric surplus the other days. So I'm in a caloric surplus essentially 6 days per week. So I don't need as much glycogen to fill back out. I shouldn't be completely glycogen depleted when I get to my high days, so I don't need as much carbs. The object of the high day is to fill up glycogen during contest prep and the off season, and to have a little extra for a surplus for adding new tissue during the off season. So that is generally the premise of it. I know it was a long-winded answer, but carb cycling is a bit complex. So hopefully that explains it for you. All right, next question here from this is ask, if asked as a question, do you have any anecdotes about the different cosmetics appearances when a person gets down to 6% body fat with or without a DHT derivative? Any experience with just pulling testosterone out towards the end? Well, you name it, I have tried it. I have done cuts with testosterone. I have done cuts without testosterone. I've done cuts with nandrolone only, where I did nandrolone, and well, really, I used to run this crazy cycle. I have a video up about it if you want to look up my crazy nandrolone and tren cycle, but I coach and work with before. And it's actually a very effective cycle. It keeps you dry, where I would run nandrolone, tren, and Anavar. It sounds insane, but it works. So I've definitely cut without testosterone before. I have done it. I got very dry, and I thought I looked pretty great, but not as great as I did with the other ways of doing things. The issue I've run into when not using tests, and I don't know if everybody else has this experience, is I get very flat looking. Test seems to fill me out, so I prefer to keep as much test in as I can tolerate toward to the end of a prep cycle. Usually I'll cut it a little bit at the end to help dry up a little bit, but it's a fine line. You got to walk between it. I have also tried it without DHT derivatives. I need DHT derivatives to get hard, although you can get pretty hard with tren. But the DHT derivatives just seem to give you an extra bit of polish that you can't get without them. I don't know. And it could be all a placebo effect and all in my head, but I have found that if I want that hard, grainy look, I have to run DHT derivatives. So I will run Masteron typically. I'll run Primobolan on contest prep. I'll run Anavar at the end. I used to run Winstrol, but I've subbed Winstrol out for halotestin, although halotestin's not a DHT derivative, but that's generally what I do to get that hard. And Proviron, so I'm throwing the kitchen sink at it. The proverbial DHT kitchen sink at it at the end. So that's how I do it. I'm not saying it's the right way to do it, but that's how I do it. I think that gives me a nice, chiseled, hard look at the end. I've seen some natties. Some of the most in shape, ripped, hard-looking bodybuilders I've ever seen are natties. So clearly you can do it without it. Take a look at like some of the natty world championships in bodybuilding. Those dudes get absolutely fucking ripped and hard and dry. So clearly you don't need PEDs to get ripped hard and dry. They do it. Now I know they take longer with their preps, and there's a lot of water manipulation that goes on and yada yada, but I think actually it's probably harder to get dry and grainy while on PEDs because of the water retention that they can cause. So that's just me speculating, but hopefully that answers your question. All right, next question I've got here is from EPF55. He goes, what are options to deal with elevated blood pressure? He goes, I get increased blood pressure even with 80 milligrams of telmisartan, and I've upped my dosages from 250 tests to when adding 200 milligrams of Primo weekly. My BP went from 125 over 70 to 146 over 80 after a few weeks on the test in Primo. Are there some people that are more sensitive to increased dosages? Does your BP change from one or the other when you're blasting and cruising? So I found, for whatever reason, Primo seems to elevate my blood pressure too, but it tends to go back down. It seems like it bumps up at first, and then it goes back down. So I would ride it out, and one, I'm not saying 146 over 80 is great, but it's not like you're on the verge of death. you want that top number to be below 130 and the bottom number to be below 80. So I mean, but you're okay. You're starting to get into the hypertensive zone, but that that's you're running pretty conservative doses of PEDs, 250 tests with 200 milligrams of Primo. I would say that it might be estrogen and water retention, but you with the Primo and that low dose of test, you shouldn't be really converting much estrogen. But you may want to get your estrogen checked. Now I have had some issues when I run really, really, really high doses of stuff and I'm eating a shit ton of food. That's another thing here too. This could be diet related too. Your diet could be shit. So I would check that, or if you have higher body fat, that could be an issue. But there is what I call the nuclear bomb option of antihypertensive drugs, and there's a drug that I have used sometimes in the off season called X-Forge. And X-Forge has a calcium channel blocker and an ACE inhibitor in it. Both. It has amlodipine and valsartan in it. That's the ARB. That's not ACE inhibitor. It's an ARB. Sorry. So ARB, not ACE inhibitor. So yeah, that X-Forge, and there is also a version of X-Forge called X-Forge HCT, which also has a diuretic in it. So you get all three, and if that doesn't bring you down, I don't know what to tell you. You do not need that with where your blood pressure is at. That's not like, I mean, I've seen people with 200 over 100 and just some crazy numbers before. Hell, I've had mine up, 160 over 100 before. Not since I've gotten in better shape, but when I was a lard ass before I got back into working out, and this was off gear, just before anybody starts throwing stones at me. I wasn't even taking any gear. I was just a fat ass. I would get up crazy high like that sometimes. It's actually better now than what it was when I was not taking gear and when I was fat. But I think I was retaining a bunch of water. My estrogen was through the roof. It's just a fat and probably 25-30% body fat, which doesn't help. So X-Forge is an option, but I would take a look at your diet. I would take a look at your estrogen levels, and see what's going on there first. I think 146 over 80 is not the end of the world, but ideally we want it lower. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. All right, next question here from Carter Fleming. Carter asks thoughts on pausing Anavar and Anadrol or something like that. Something like 2 days on, 3 days off versus 4 to 8 weeks straight with an oral. Yeah, I've done that before. I used to like running orals like that, where I'd run them only a few days a week pre-workout, like just on weak body parts. I love Anadrol and I love the strength that it gives you, but Anadrol fucks my stomach up. It also seems to aggravate gyno in me, even though it does not convert to estrogen. There's a lot of things. A lot of people don't know this, but Anadrol seems to have some sort of direct interaction or indirect interaction with the estrogen receptor, and it can cause gyno in some people. I've seen it many times. So yeah, I used to take a couple days a week. I thought about doing it again this fall, but I'm getting old. It's not a smart idea at my age. Anadrol is really hard on you. But if you ran 50 milligrams, say 3 days a week pre-workout, yeah, sure, you could probably get away with that. Anavar, I used to run a lot of Anavar. I would run Anavar. There was times I'd run Anavar year round pre-workout. Same deal. I'd run it 3 or 4 days a week, just run like 30 milligrams. I don't remember the study, but I did see a study. I think it was they monitored women taking Anavar up to as high as 30 milligrams per day, and they showed no liver or very, very little liver stress. Their liver values were in the normal range. I think it was up to 30 milligrams per day. You push past that, and then although Anavar seems to, if I recall correctly, somebody can correct me on this if I'm wrong, Anavar gets processed largely through the kidneys and the liver both, but out of the orals, Anavar seems to have the least impact on the liver. I don't see liver values go up unless you're running really high doses. So I would probably choose the Anavar over the Anadrol, but depending on what your goals are, for force production, strength, there's not much that beats Anadrol. It almost makes it worth it to take it, take the risk with Anadrol. If I were young in my 20s, I'd probably roll the dice a little more often with Anadrol. I'm not, so I don't, another issue with Anadrol is blood pressure goes through the roof. I see dudes where they look like a fucking tomato in the gym. I can, some of the dudes over in the powerlifting area, they look like goddamn tomatoes when they're lifting. They get super red, and I can tell that they're running a bunch of Anadrol, high red blood cell count, and topped off with high blood pressure. You see dudes getting nosebleeds doing deadlifts and busting out high blood vessels in their eyes and shit like that when they take Anadrol. So just something to keep in mind. But yeah, certainly you could do it. I just don't like orals anymore in a mass phase because they crush my appetite. I just don't want to eat when I take orals, and I think a lot of people experience that. I think I would rather just take a higher dose of Primobolan or something, but that's me. Anyway, on to the next one. All right, next one is from Zam Monster. Best injectable anabolics for people who struggle with acne. The best cycle I've seen for people with acne is a nandrolone only cycle. Acne is weird. I don't exactly understand all the mechanisms with how acne works, but it seems to be that it can either be caused by DHT and estrogen both. So it's sort of a crapshoot of which it is. And I've seen people who take nandrolone only, and they don't seem to have problems with acne. And I speculate that is because nandrolone does not convert directly to DHT. It converts to dihydronandrolone, if I remember correctly. And nandrolone very slightly aromatizes. I think it's only like at 3%, so it barely any of it turns into estrogen. So it's pretty much you're not going to get any conversion to anything with it. So I've seen people that seem to respond well to it and don't end up with acne with nandrolone. I don't know. I mean, it seems like a lot of the DHT derivatives cause guys to get acne. Test certainly does. So there are not a lot of choices. Also, some of it can be personal hygiene. I've seen guys that are just fucking pigs. What is it? Salicylic acid wash you can get that you can scrub your back with if you get acne. I've been lucky. I don't get acne. I've never gotten acne. It's just a genetic thing, I guess. I can take whatever I want and I don't get acne. Now my hair falls out. You guys can see that. Although I went bald when I wasn't on anything. Dudes are all the time giving me shit saying that I lost my hair taking steroids. I didn't take steroids for like 12 years, from like age 33 to 44, 45. I didn't touch anything. I was completely off. And my dad's bald. My dad went bald when he was in his 40s, and my dad's never taken anything. So I think I would have gone bald regardless. I probably could have done some things to averted it. But I was already bald by the time I started. I was not bald when I took anabolics in my 20s. And then I was bald by the time I started taking them again in my mid-40s. So just something to consider. It's largely, a lot of these things, acne, baldness, things like that, are genetically dependent. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Take care. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.